Welcome everybody who's joined us today. Before we begin, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, the Wurundjeri people. I'd like to pay my respects to these people, their culture and traditions. I pay particular respect to their elders, past and present, and to any people, Aboriginal people who are viewing us today. Thank you for joining in today. I'd just like to note a few things. We will be discussing adult concepts, so if you have young children in your vicinity, you may choose to move them to another room or view the recording later. Of course, if you're comfortable with them to listen in, that's great. We've enabled a question and answer. What I'd like you to note, folks, is that if you do see a question and answer, you can upvote it, so you can press the like on it, and that will bring it to the top of the list, so that will enable us to answer the most popular questions. Anything that's brought up during the discussion that may bring up feelings of concern, we encourage you to speak to someone, a trusted friend or family member, a peer, a member of the peer support team, healthcare provider, or one of the helplines. And we will be releasing some links to various resources at the end of the session as well, to anyone who's attended. So without further ado, I'll introduce you to Naz Erdem, who is the team leader of peer support at Spire. And he will introduce you to the panelists and then hand over to our special guest facilitator today, Sue Dixon.
Thanks, Shell. So it looks like we've got a great bunch of panel members. I want to introduce you to Sue, who is a sexual health nurse at Austin Health. And Peter Van Bentham we've got, and I guess during this discussion too, we can talk about more about injury or what sort of level we're at. Antonio and Renske, Dave and Linda, Alex over there, Sandra, Catherine Reid, joining us from Tasmania. Also, I'm a quadriplegic guy, got a C6 injury after a diving accident nearly 30 years ago, so it's been a long time for me. Might go on to Alex next.
Excellent. So I'm a T1 incomplete quad. My accident occurred March 2011. I fell off the third floor balcony of my apartment that I lived in and landed on the concrete, and then I ended up in the Alfred and then the Austin, obviously, eventually. And I spent 17 months in hospital in total before I could be discharged somewhere to live until I found a place.
No, thanks, Alex. Peter, want to introduce yourself?
Yep. Hello, everybody. I'm Peter. I'm coming to you from AQA today in the office, but I'm a C4-5 quadriplegic. Had my injury in 1999. Still currently with my partner. Had a child before injury. He was very young when I was injured, so we grew up together after my injury. You know, we did a lot together, and really enjoyed that aspect of having a child in my life and having a partner. I'd like to share that with you guys today.
Thanks, Peter. Sandra and little baby.
Hi, I'm Sandra, and this is Max. I had a horse riding accident, a horse reared and fell on top of me and crushed my lower spine. I've got damage from S1 to S5, and I've obviously had a baby since. That happened about 4 years ago.
Thanks, Sandra. Renske and Antonio. We'll let Renske go first before Antonio.
My injury.
Not your injury, but you know, who are you and who's the guy beside you?
The guy beside me is Ant, and we met at a wheelchair rugby tournament in New Zealand where I was a referee and he was a player.
And I'm Antonio, for those of you who don't know me. I had a spinal injury in 2005. I'm a C6-7 complete quad as a result of a motor vehicle accident.
Thanks, Antonio. Catherine, how are you?
Hey everyone, I'm Catherine. I'm a T4-5 paraplegic, also from a horse riding accident, and I'm also a mum. I've got two young boys, Will and Harry. Harry will possibly join us later. And I've been in a chair for 12 years now.
Thanks,
Oh,
Kathy.
and I've got a husband.
And you got a husband. That comes,
Yep.
yeah. And David and Linda joining us from the Bahamas, looks like.
That's right. Hi everyone, I'm Dave, and I've been, I had a motorbike accident back in 1998, so I've been in a wheelchair for 31 years, broke C5s and C5-6 quad, and I got married to Linda. Can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah,
8
so
years ago.
8 years. Yep, we've been married 8 years.
Thanks, David and Linda. Got Lynn, I think she was supposed to join us, but I can't see her there. Are you there, Lynn? No. So she'll
Lynn's
join us
having
later.
some technical problems, Naz.
Okay, no problem. Last but not least, Sue Dixon. So, as I mentioned, Sue's the sexual health nurse at Austin Health.
Hi everyone. Yes, I'm the one of the sexual health nurses at Austin Health. Austin's really fortunate to have a dedicated service to support people with sexual health, not sexual illnesses, but sexual health post-injury. And we do a lot of work with the spinal community as well as other health areas within Austin. Unfortunately, we're only 2 days a week, so sometimes we're a little bit difficult to contact, but we certainly do respond and support people as needed. I've been in that role for, I hate to calculate, I've basically been at Austin for 17 years. So I think the sexual health role's been about 15 years of part-time work. I also work as a community spinal nurse. And Naz has asked me to, well, the team has asked me to facilitate this discussion, acknowledging that perhaps this is a very confronting topic for everyone, not just for those that are participants, but also the panelist. So we'll do our best at answering as many questions as we possibly can and get some information out there for everyone.
Yeah, thanks, Sue. I mean, as we know, relationships and sexuality and everything that goes with it is a subject that not many people open up about. They hope that they can hear someone else talking about the subject and they'll listen into it. It's a bit confronting sometimes, and hopefully the panel over here will be able to answer a lot of the questions that the participants that are watching us right now, because it's a bit of a taboo subject, but everyone wants to know all the possibilities about it.
Absolutely. I want to reiterate too, as Sal mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, that if there are any issues that do present that people want to discuss further, I encourage you to speak to somebody, a health professional or a friend, somebody trusted, and by all means, you're welcome to call the Sexual Health Service within Austin Health to have further discussions. We're obviously not going to be able to tackle every aspect of sexual health post-spinal cord injury, but we'll do our best to deal with the questions that come to mind. So with that, I suppose we can just open up our minds and consider what sexual health might mean. It is basically a World Health Organization sub-issue, which they meet and discuss often because of sometimes around sexual illnesses, but mostly around sexuality. The definition on the World Health Organization is very vague, and I encourage, I suppose, or I talk about everybody being able to define it in their own way. It's not just about illnesses within sexual health, but also sexuality and how we see ourselves, how we want the world to see us as well. Today we've divided up the topics the best we can into 5 different topics and offering opportunity to ask questions within that. And the first topic we're going to address is relationships. And it's not just about our sexual relationships, but post-spinal cord injury, what that means for any relationship within our family, our friends, etc. One of the really important things after spinal cord injury, as we all know, is that sometimes there's a significant change in somebody's role post an injury, which can sometimes impact a relationship. Peter, I wonder if you could enhance some of that information, elaborate on that?
Yeah, I'll speak a little bit about it, but just at the start, I'll just talk about my experience, of course. You know, when I was first injured, you know, I used to be an electrician, trade-based, and my partner, we just had our child. So my son was 6 weeks old at the time. So, of course, I had my injury, and then, you know, a lot changed, of course, and I wasn't the breadwinner no more. I was not the provider. I was, you know, that person who was coming home that had to change that role and work with my partner to find that new role. So it was all about exploring that and how that was going to be. And that was pretty difficult for me because, you know, it was the unknown. But you know, I became the stay-at-home father for a while and worked a little bit, and my wife worked a bit more, and I paid the bills and I did the shopping and all those other things, and the roles really changed, and in a good way, you know, it snowballed, and as I got more independent, I did more and more and more. Did a lot with my son, taking to school and school activities and all those things while still working, and my partner, of course, took on that role as well, but that shifted many times because she would work or I would work, and we just really worked well together. But it was about opening that right up and how much that role changed, and being a big part of that, taking the ownership of being involved and talking it out and working it out. Yeah. Is there any more I can add to that, Sue? Yeah.
No, I think that covers it really well. I suppose what I would be really interesting to know is that obviously wasn't a very easy thing for you to do, to quickly change from one area to another. But what worked for you? What made that become more meaningful to you?
Well, you know, very quickly I realised that the injury just wasn't about me. It was about my partner, my family, my son, everyone involved around me. So I'm not so quickly, I suppose, because this is also so 20 years ago, but, you know, I learnt that and we all had to move together. And, you know, I had to not think of me so much because the injury was me, but it was also everybody around me. And I really had to take that on and help that and nurture that and be a part. You know, at the start, everybody was so supportive towards me. Everyone was so courageous for me, but I needed to be that for everybody else too, and work that out together. Yeah.
And is there anybody else within the panel that can share something of a similar change in roles and how that impacted the relationships within the family?
I could talk a bit from my perspective, which is quite similar to Peter's actually. My husband had a bad back from being a stonemason. So when I had the role of being the physic one in the family, we lived on a big bush block, and I did all the chainsawing and did all the drains and drove all the machinery. And after my accident, I wasn't able to do any of that. I can walk, but my stability and stuff isn't so good. And so we really had to shift, and it wasn't possible for him to do it either. So it's actually taken us years to find that balance and quite a lot of conflict. It's not a love story really, it wouldn't be a movie. A lot of distress that neither of us feel able to live the life we had planned, and I guess a lot of having to realign our goals and rethink about them. We now live in the country, but on a small sort of suburban block that we can manage along with just minimum support from a support worker. And yeah, we've just had to really shift. We both had to work a lot together on what we wanted from life. We used to go bushwalking and things like that. All the things sort of we did as a couple that bonded us no longer applied. So yeah, it wasn't some romantic love story. There was a lot of arguing, a lot of distress, a lot of I don't know if we can do this, but we got there in the end. And I've got to say, really just letting go of a lot and realising we couldn't do it anymore, and that maybe we needed to try something completely new was key for us.
And I
So
think
working as a team
Mm.
helped strengthen where you wanted to go and where you were able to go into the future.
Yeah, I'm not so sure if it was working as a team. I think both of us had to actually go away and do some soul searching. So I had to really redefine, it's different for everyone, but the thing, I tried all sorts of different approaches with different therapists. The one that ended up working for me was going back to my core values and thinking, you know, what I can do has changed, but my values haven't changed. And so what are new activities I can do that still are in line with my values? I guess I had thought that now that I couldn't do so much, I had to take up painting and be this creative person, and I'm not. I'm a mathematician. I'm a very physical person. So I've found other ways to be non-active in the same way, but still feel like I'm a physical person and get that part of it. And it was only, I think, once we both did that soul searching and separated for a while that we could come back and reconnect.
Excellent. It made me think that in that conversation, obviously, it was an opportunity for you both to then define who you are and what you wanted. Your relationship strengthened, Sandra, I assume, or you're still together?
I don't know, maybe it would have been even better if that's a hard one to answer. We're still together.
It makes me go to the next phase of our questioning too, about strategies. What do people do to strengthen their relationships? What are some examples of what you might have done, or not just for Sandra, but for anyone on the panel, what you might have done to strengthen your relationship to make sure it's lasting?
For me, probably because I'm more high needs and a quadriplegic, I'm really ruled out, and this is just for me, I really ruled out my partner not doing any of my personal care. So that was important for me to keep that relationship separate, for her not to do my personal care. And just for some people that may work, but for me, I knew that wouldn't work. Yeah. So that straight away gave her time and freed her up to do it, because she still had a lot to do anyway because of me. But it freed up a lot of her time because I was supported by carers. So and then I could take on roles in the family and do things and assist and be a part of the family in a physical way too, in many senses, like getting the lawns mowed, or all the maintenance things around the house. The things that she didn't have to worry about anymore after I got better. 18 months later, probably, that I got more better and was able to attend to those things through supports. So, and then it was just about getting back to the things we really enjoyed. And you brought up a really good point, Sandra, was about letting go of the things that you no longer did do. You had to change that and reinvent that. So, and that was sort of fun, and you try things and maybe it didn't work and you try other things. So, holidays were always really good, having time together, getting out of the mundane part of life and setting time aside to do more for each other. It was really valuable for me.
Yeah, I might just jump in there too. Like I have, I'm a C5-6 quad, so I have carers in the morning, plus also in the afternoon to help with things. So the decision that I made, I've always, because I wanted to maintain my independence, plus also some separation from our relationship, was not to have Linda do any of my care. That's important for me. And as like you, Peter, it's all what we want, and it's what suits us. And it was just important for me to have, I suppose, that separation in our relationship. So I've carers do my care, and where Linda can be my best friend, lover, and all that sort of stuff. But also, I guess when it comes to, I suppose, more some of the cooking and that sort of thing, I enjoy that more, and so where Linda is really into that, so I tend to do that role, even though I have support workers or carers to assist in that area. But that's sort of like the part of the role that I do in our household, and Belinda's more into Working, reading.
I love working. I love work. I love what I do. I love all those things.
So
yeah,
and I think like we've only been together for like 9 years, and we are still trying to work our relationship out, actually how it works. It's one of the biggest challenges for us is carers, about coming in and out of our house. And so even though generally it's fine, but yeah, I think at times it comes a bit of a struggle. So what helps us is to have a little bit of separation. So Linda, so we can both get a bit of time out from, like, it was okay when Linda was traveling a lot with work. That gave her a bit of time out from the, I suppose, the having carers and that sort of thing. So we find that that's probably a good strategy, is to have a little bit of a break, well, it works for us anyway. So.
And I think redefining perhaps gender roles as well. I think we're both very big on that in terms of gender roles and not wanting to take on stereotypes. So we're both passionate about constantly, we're still discovering and we're still redefining what works for us.
You made a really good point there, Dave, I think, in the fact that you mentioned that you've only been together for 9 years. So it implies that that's very early in your relationship, but already you've had lots of changes. And I think that's another aspect of relationships that we have to accept, that over life, they change. Your expectations change, your roles change. And yes, the spinal cord injury has certainly made a forced change in some of the things that you can still enjoy and not enjoy, but you're ready for change because you've been changing all the way along. I think it's really important to see that side of relationships.
That's why, like Linda and I, sorry.
Yeah, keep going.
Linda and I, well, got together 9 years ago, so I've been very, I'd sort of had my life worked out as far as my independence was concerned with my carers and that sort of stuff. Then when I met Linda, that changed everything again. And so then that's where we had to really try and work out what can work for us. Yeah, we're still working through it at times.
Yeah.
Have the ups and downs. But as you're saying, yeah, it is circumstances change, and we all change as people. Also in our needs and goals and desires change. So it seems to be a bit of a constant redefinement, I suppose. But yeah.
And I suppose in amongst all of that, we talk about relationships, but it might also be worth exploring what helps maintain the intimacy within your relationship. Is there anybody within the panel that is happy to share some of their strategies around intimate times?
Yeah, I don't mind adding a little bit there, but also throw. But for me, it was, of course, it was nothing like it was before, and it was a journey that I didn't know, and I didn't know how to tackle it. But it was just about exploring what that was, and just taking it slow and being comfortable, and setting that up right. And there's many ways to do it. In the sense of feeling good together and feeling loved and having a partner. There's many, many ways to do that, but the most important thing is just to start exploring, to see what that is for you and start working on it from there. And that's how, I think for me, was the hardest part was starting that. And my partner and us having our roles changed so much for me because we were together prior my injury, but just opening that up and taking it on and not hiding from it, and getting help. I actually got a bit of help through the Austin when I was going through Talbot, and the conversation was easy, good to talk about it and start to see what that is, and then we could take it when we got home and whatever that might be.
If I could add, Sue, on that around intimacy, obviously I had my injury when I was 19, and I know I did some work with you on this as well as your predecessor, Alexa, at the time, but really reprogramming my mind around intimacy, around what I thought, like what I could do physically before my injury and then afterwards with different sensation and obviously lack of sensation in some areas as well. So really reprogramming my mind around, I guess, different ways to be intimate. That was still enjoyable, but then not.
Antonio, can you elaborate on that? What do you mean by different ways?
Yes, I remember, like I said, you and I did some work around talking about things like touch and different types of touch, allowing someone, to touch parts of you that you can feel, and really thinking, changing the mindset of, well, like before my injury, I thought, well, that would have just been stupid. I was like, what's the point of that? But then understanding after my injury, like I said, really reprogramming my mind towards, well, things like that are important, and sort of really utilizing the parts of my body, because my sensation where I can feel is heightened. So I'm oversensitive in some parts, and then exploring that over time as well. So I guess that's the difference in my mind, that I really, I guess I was young and ignorant, to then educating myself about my own body, to then finding different ways to be intimate.
Yeah, awesome, thanks. Alex, have you got something to add to that conversation?
Yeah, I wanted to remind people that there are also older single men out there and single women out there who are also looking for relationships. And I know we've had some people have had relationships form after their injury, which is great. But I also just want to highlight, sometimes when you're coming out of hospital, your view of having a relationship or potentially starting something new, particularly as an older man and an older gay man, isn't always viewed probably in its best light. And my experience has not been the best, I guess, coming out after the hospital and trying to form relationships. It's difficult. I think people have got preconceived ideas about people with disabilities and spinal cord injuries in particular when they see you coming through the bar or something in a wheelchair and that sort of stuff. So it kind of puts people at a distance from you. And my own perceived ideas about what my future would be like. I mean, I just turned 50 just before my accident, 1 month. So I had a whole different idea ahead, and I was single at the time and looking for something new to start. And then the accident happened, and I thought that's the end of it. I'm going to be living alone or whatever, and never having another relationship. But it's been almost 10 years. I've had a few brief relationships, and the odd casual encounter and stuff. But I just want to highlight, sometimes it's not always the easiest thing to maintain, for everybody. And some people have more success than others, whether it's a personality thing or my own perception about my own limitations and stuff. So there's a whole lot of things to unpack when you begin a relationship, and trying to maintain a relationship with a spinal cord injury or any kind of disability is an awful lot of hard work for everybody.
Absolutely, yep.
And I'm still looking at it from different perspectives. I've certainly opened up my ideas around relationships, in that previous male relationships have always been monogamous and never looked sideways, as it were. But now, as a single man with an injury, I have opened up to the possibilities of having either, multiple casual encounters with people who are friends as such, friends with benefits as they used to call them, or having, maybe a relationship with several people at the same time who might be in you know, a polygamous kind of arrangement. It made me open up my ideas around what sexuality and relationships can be or could be when you have a disability. And I think that's one thing that we don't talk about, those kind of ideas beyond the usual constructs in the community for relationships.
Absolutely.
They all have to be monogamous, and they have to be straight, as it were, and they have to be, you know, guided towards, you know, having a happy house and a dog and a cat and a white picket fence, that sort of stuff. That doesn't sit well with everybody, and it certainly doesn't sit well with me. I have no intentions of ever having children, so now that I'm approaching 60, that's not going to happen. And as you know, we all kind of will be aware that our sexual function changes with our spinal cord injury. Some people can ejaculate, some can't. Some people have varying degrees of that impairment. And I'm sure it's exactly the same for women. Their sensory changes will have been impaired, enjoyment will have impaired, and all those kind of things impact on your relationship as well. I know it certainly changed my notion of what I could or couldn't do physically, but also just emotionally as well.
I think it's a great point you make, Alex, about opening up your ideas.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think, again, it goes back to that whole change that we experience throughout life. I'm sure your ideas now, not just you, but, you know, for most of us, when we're younger, are very different to what they are now.
Oh, yes.
And then increase more so because of, as you say, the change in function and the change in your ideas. You create new ideas. You look for what possibilities are out there.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. Sandra, are you still interested to participate in this section of the conversation?
Yeah, I was just thinking that it was really, I guess, for me, similar in terms of reconnecting emotionally with my husband and sort of redefining our practical life, or our shared, you know, life, and having to go away and explore ourselves. That was really similar to, I think, what had to happen on the intimacy front too, more so for me than my husband. But I really found that going away, and I remember a friend in a chair said to me, "Oh, have you had an orgasm yet since post-injury?" And it was about a year after then. And I said to her, "No, I can't. I was told by the doctor that the periodontal nerve has been cut, so I won't have clitoral stimulation anymore." And she said, "Oh, don't worry, just keep at it. Buy yourself some dildos and just keep trying." So for me, it was really that personal physical exploration that I had to do. And it took ages. I don't get pleasure the same way I used to. It's completely different now, actually. But I think that personal exploration, just to jump right in the deep end, my legs aren't affected that much, but the part of my body that really is affected by my spinal injury is my bowels and my bladder, and my pelvic floor, and the sensation around there. I had a horse riding accident, and it's my saddle area that's now numb. And I think for me, it was really exploring also what would cause accidents to happen and how to avoid them, and exploring that myself without my partner there was the way I felt safest doing it. So yeah, I did buy a lot of sex toys, and I did read a lot of blogs, and I did make a lot of messes. I went through quite a lot of those bed sheets in that period to just, re-find myself. It was like a very stinky, embarrassing second puberty really for me in my late 30s.
I also want to add, maybe in that part around that intimacy and stuff, you know, people suggested, have you tried all the other, sex toys and stuff, but also things like Viagra and all those other things, and Cavajet, which is the injection into the penis and all that kind of stuff. And, they're not things some of those things I've tried because I thought, oh, well, then maybe that might help. But, I guess you also have to be mindful of medical implications and potential interactions with your other medications and your blood pressure and stuff. I know that Viagra used to give me hideous headaches and stuff. That if you've got blood pressure, you want to be very careful around what you're actually consuming on top of your own, related medications with spinal cord injuries and stuff as well.
Yeah, and that's just on that as well. That's one of the risks that I sort of faced. Like I was going through rehab and then post-rehab, I was having a lot of the autonomic dysreflexia, and the treatment is the GTN spray. And that has an interaction with Viagra, Cialis and all that. That apparently if they're both in your system at the same time, it's detrimental for your health. So things like that you're sort of learning, well, you need these medications for sexual function, but then getting told that, look, if you have, a bit of autonomic dysreflexia, we need to give you this spray, but you need to let us know if any of that is in your system, because there are side effects, that can be quite not so good, I guess. And that was, so to me, that was a deterrent at the time. It's like, well, why do I want to try and experiment with all these pills when I may need this other spray to then help me potentially? And that was, I guess, a deterrent from experimenting with those pills at that time.
I guess the other thing I also know is because I'm single, I go out a lot and I socialise a lot, and but now how I'm perceived in the community in a wheelchair has changed. Where I used to stand up, I was 6'1" almost. Now that I'm in a wheelchair, I'm just under 5 foot with the wheelchair. Luckily, I've got one of those scissor-less chairs, so I can also, raise it, so I'm almost at eye height. But it still changes the dynamic in terms of grabbing people's attention or getting that whole eye contact and going on and things. And I think that's another difficult area if you're single. And you're trying to do it on the commercial kind of scene, I guess, going out and then trying to see what else happens on the. There was a question earlier about whether we've got chat apps and stuff, and I have put a list together which I've sent to Sal and Sue's got it, I think, as well. That has got a whole lot of resources, but also chat apps for men and women and gay men on there.
You open up another conversation there, Alex, about body image.
Yes.
There's obviously a huge change, and if your sense of self is related to your stature and your ability to look people in the eye, obviously having a change of presentation to the world is huge. So I just wonder if everyone on the panel can reflect on what it is that they might use to help themselves feel better about themselves, help themselves stand out in the world, help themselves be the person that they want to be to other people.
Yeah, I guess I could start there. So something that I learned, I guess, like Alex says, going out and being single, when I was going out, when I was single, the thing I always focused on is, and I sort of learned through mistakes, to be perfectly honest, was I would focus so much about being in a chair that I would forget, like if I met someone out, like, whether I was trying to pick them up or just talk to them, but even like professionally, if I was meeting someone new, I would focus so much on myself and my injury, and I would forget about speaking about what it is I would want to speak to them about. I just got to the point where, I guess, my image, my self-image, as you say, body image, was myself in the chair. And I had to really, once again, re-educate myself about, all right, well, they can see that I'm in a chair. I don't need to talk about it. If I just speak as I would ordinarily, and that was a shift in my mindset that I then allowed my personality to come out. And I figured, well, they can see who I am. They can see that I'm in a chair. They can see what I look like. I then need to, I guess, normalize myself to them, because they can see that I'm different. from that point of view, and then just normalize the conversation. And once my mindset changed to that, just allow my natural personality to come out, then, you know, that really sort of was changed for me around image. And my perception around myself was just accepting that, look, there's nothing I can do about the way I look, and people can see how I look. If I start worrying about how I look, that then resonates with them. Like, they're going to pick up that I'm worried about it, and that the conversation becomes about me being in a wheelchair as opposed to me the person, them the person, and what have you. So
absolutely. So in your mind, it's about your mind, like your thinking, your sense of perception of how you're going to present yourself to the world.
Yeah, and I use that, like, you know, not just with relationships, but if I were to meet someone new now, or if it's a job interview or any sort of friendship, then that's the way I perceive myself. But I was really lucky as well that a lot of my really good friends are female. So I had these conversations with them, and they would basically say, well, you know, be who you are to us, to the world, because they would see who I am, because I could be myself with them because I had an existing friendship. It's like, don't be paranoid about anything else, and like having really good conversations with them really helped me when I then did go out to meet people and what have you.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any strategies that they put in place?
Yeah, it's very similar for me, even though it's different because I had a partner, but it was just changing that thought in yourself. And when you go out, and the body image is huge and a big part of it, you know, and that was a lot for me too. And it was just about being a bit more confident and not seeing yourself as the person in the wheelchair, but seeing yourself as the funny person, or the person who's got a point of view, or the person that can hold a conversation and offer more and build on that. So when you do meet people, you just talk, be conversational, and you carry on with it, and not be the person in the wheelchair, but be the person who talks and's got lots of conversation, or whatever that is, you know.
So basically bring your personality to the forefront.
Yeah.
Yes. Catherine, have you got a contribution for this one?
Yeah, sure. I've had, I suppose, a few different things, I suppose, since I had my accident, just trying on different things. Like, I mean, I was big into earrings for a while, and that made me feel a lot better, and different things as I've gone along have sort of become part of my uniform, I suppose, for lack of a better word. Like, I wear boots a lot. But just thinking back to what Antonio was saying, I found very early on in rehab, like before I'd even left hospital, that people who didn't know me spoke to me a lot differently. So it's become a part of my persona, I suppose, that when I'm meeting people for the first time, I don't give them an opportunity to make an idiot of themselves, basically, by assuming that I'm less capable than I am. So if I go out for dinner with my friends, my husband, my family, whatever, I always take it upon myself to deal with the waiter, for example. So I don't give that person the chance to ignore me and speak to my husband and ask him what I'm having for dinner or something like that. So that's been a way that I've kind of countered that from very early on. It's also helped build my self-confidence and my speaking to people and that sort of thing. So
awesome. Thanks, Catherine. Alex,
Yes.
maybe you could step in here and mention something in relation to your sense of self, because you've already identified that your height was something that you identified strongly with.
Yeah, I guess in the community I am a part of, you know, to be big and tall and have a beard and all that kind of stuff was quite appealing to a lot of people. And, you know, I move in that kind of world where that kind of supposed manliness is admired hugely. And when it's changed, you know, purely by height, you certainly notice the difference. And the world has changed, particularly with COVID, of course. You know, we weren't allowed to go out for a long time, and we couldn't mix and mingle. So the jump onto online chat work and stuff, and using the apps has increased tenfold. So one of the things I did was to make sure that my profile always had a mention about my being in a wheelchair is part of it, and that people are aware of it from the outset, so there's no kind of, they see your picture, they see your face, and they make a lot of assumptions that that you're a fully functioning person and all that kind of stuff. But I make sure that they're aware from the outset that you're dealing with a person with a disability, and some limitations physically and some restrictions emotionally maybe that goes along with it, because I'm not what I used to be and I can't function like I used to. But there are things that I can do and I do enjoy still doing. Some of it's a bit more placid than it used to be, I guess, for some people. So it's really forcing me to put more into the detail around the profile of who I am in words, rather than just relying on the visual stuff, which is what we used to rely on. And making sure that the person's not under any misconceptions about who they're dealing with anymore.
So putting all your cards on the table.
Yeah, and being as honest as I can and as upfront as I can.
Yeah.
And surprisingly, some of the responses I've got back was kind of like, well, you're the person I'm interested in. I don't really care about the chair. And often that seems to come from people from overseas more so than local people. And people that I know locally that used to, used to make attempts at people in my kind of, I guess, realm of attractiveness stuff have certainly, they're friendly, but they're not as friendly as they used to be, shall we say. So that it's the degree of attractiveness has changed, because I'm not 6'1" when I stand up.
Yes.
Anymore. I'm just under 5 foot, but maybe I'm 6 foot with the wheelchair lifted up off the scissor lift of the seat.
Yes.
I don't know, I can flip that too, because there's been plenty of times I've been out with a group of cheeky guys in wheelchairs, and we all have been a bit cheeky, and we just take ownership of where we are, because we are the attention, and we turn that into ourselves and have a really good time. It depends how you look at that, and some guys that I know in wheelchairs I've gone out with have shown me how they can turn that around and use the chair as an icebreaker. You say, hey,
yeah. No, just add to that, Peter. I mean, that's what I found too. I mean, when you go out, I mean, it doesn't matter if you've got a disability or not. There's going to be ignorant people out there that if the wheelchair was there or wasn't there, it's going to be the same situation. I found. I mean, you go out to have a good time, to meet people, and you smile and you say hello to people. I mean, if you go out and just get a beer or whatever and sit in the corner, you're not really going to get too far or meet any people that way. You have to be confident, I think, and that's the first thing people notice. When they see you're confident and you can speak, you can think, you can talk a good conversation, that really is attractive to people, and that just gets the ball rolling. I think it's as easy as that. If you've got the confidence and you're able to be confident around people, after a while, like someone else said, the chair's secondary. They don't notice the chair.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, Naz. So I met Dave on eHarmony. That's how we found each other, and I had no exposure to disability in my life, but there was something that drew me to his profile, and we went out, and I was very uncomfortable with the wheelchair, and I spoke all about myself because I didn't want to say something that was perhaps wrong, but David just had his confidence, and even when we got in the car and went somewhere, he just said, okay, grab the wheelchair, do this, do this, do this. And I just did what he told me to do. And it took all that side just disappeared. And his personality was just so big and came through. And his, I guess, surety of himself was the thing that attracted me to him. and just his personality. So I think it absolutely exactly what you said, Naz.
No,
And
that's
just,
sorry, go Dave.
I was just going to touch in on what you said about confidence. Now I find that confidence is very important. Now I had my accident back in '88, and I was a 6'3", well built. I was a carpenter, and then when I was broke my neck, a quad that could barely push up an incline. My whole, I suppose, view of myself, I still wanted to be the person that I used to be, but when I looked in the mirror, I wasn't, and that took a time to try and come to terms with that, but for me, it was also about how I was treated. Early on, a lot of people didn't see you in a wheelchair, like you were with somebody else. They would then talk to the upright that was with me, or somebody else. So I soon worked out that by having being a bit more assertive and having that a bit of confidence, and starting the conversation certainly goes a long way, and that changes people's perception about the wheelchair. They don't then see you as being in a wheelchair; they see you more as a person. I found that very much in the when I was working in the corporate environment too, because I've had to deal with contractors and other people, and being upfront and having that confidence certainly changes their perceptions of how they see you. So, yeah, good point.
I got to the stage where I was fairly confident, but then you talk about being comfortable in a wheelchair, but it's also using the wheelchair. Like I found going out and meeting girls, and like they were curious, and like I would use that curiosity to my benefit, as horrible as that sounds. Like I would play on it, like, they would ask questions and I'd be like, yeah, and then use, that works, didn't it? And then but use that, like, because I guess it would be within them to be curious, and it's like, okay, well, let's use that to sort of open a conversation and then lead to wherever that led. And Alex, just on your point about people from overseas, Renska and I actually met overseas and did a long distance relationship there for a while. Now we obviously live together, so even though I was disabled and what have you, we're still able to have a long distance relationship, me flying across to New Zealand and Renska flying to Australia, and we're able to make that work. So yeah, it is possible.
Yeah, I think it's certainly possible. Anything's possible, and like I said, I think a lot of my ideas have changed, and I'm certainly more open to anything coming along. Compared to when I was 10 years ago to where I am today, I think I'm doing much better, and certainly more open to different notions about relationships and how those relationships should function, and my ideas about myself and that sort of stuff has changed. But I think there's still an element of disability phobia in the general community for some people, and they experience that, and that's the stuff we have to keep challenging. And I think that's
it definitely is, but still that just thinking that way too. I'm sure it doesn't stop you from going out and all that sort of stuff. So you still have to go out with an open mind and go out to have fun, and talk to people, meet people.
Yeah, well, it hasn't stopped me from going out. I certainly I've made it my life's work to go out to as many cafes and pubs as I can that I can get into without running over people's feet. Of course, that's always the big thing. When you've got 250 kilos of me in a chair running over people's feet, it's not fun.
That's not a good way to meet people.
No, especially if not wearing steel cap boots.
That does open the conversation of what are the ways people meet and develop new relationships. eHarmony has proven successful with Dave and Linda. Does anyone else have any ideas or would like to share where they've met people?
Well,
Well,
we
just gonna
met.
say- Oh, sorry. I was just going to say that question comes up quite a lot. I mean, people are dating online a lot, through all these different meeting websites. I wanted to ask Dave. Now, a lot of people who ask me, they say, should I mention my disability in there or not, and how much? And my answer might be different to everyone, but I always say, leave a clue in there. Either in a photo or in some of the text.
Yeah, I have to agree there. When I put my profile up on eHarmony, it was going to be pretty obvious that I was in a wheelchair. It's, sticks out. You can't really hide the wheelchair. So I had a photo of me in a wheelchair, but I didn't say I had quadriplegia. But my little, I suppose, my little clue for the more discerning viewers was I had gone fishing and I was holding a little tiny fish up with my gummy hands. And so that was a clue that my hands didn't quite work as they should. So, but unfortunately, did you pick it up?
No, I didn't pick it up. No.
Wasn't that discerning?
But again, I don't think it doesn't matter. Just being there on the first date, obviously knew something wasn't quite right with Dave's hands, but he was still able to pick things up a certain way because of the adaptation, the way he has evolved over time. So it was just a bit of I guess, like Antonio said, it's a bit of curiosity there, but it didn't have to have a label, if you like. There wasn't the label there.
So,
Catherine, I see that you want to have a part in this conversation. Share some of your meeting adventures.
I met my husband in the bike shop. So his best friend owned one of the local bike shops in town, and I used to get all my chair repairs and stuff done through him. I played wheelchair basketball for a while, and I used to pay the boys for their repairs on my chairs with chocolate cake. So I won him over with my chocolate cake.
Good strategy.
So was he a customer, did you say, Catherine, or was he an employee there?
His best mate owns the bike shop, and he'd quite often in there working. So
we're going to go do some stalking. Is that what you're saying?
No, I used to go in there and learn how to build bikes.
Okay.
Something to do with my spare time. Learn how to put push bikes together.
I haven't seen any attractive repairmen at a wheelchair shop, I'm afraid.
You're looking in the wrong shop.
I think so.
I think, Alex, you made a very good point too before about, getting out there and getting into bars, etc. But you also made that little subtext of the ones that you can get into.
Yes,
So,
well, Melbourne, I'm originally from Perth, so life's very different. But moving into Melbourne, the kind of venues you have here are generally older. So most of the pubs are much older. They have a ridiculous step at the front. They haven't modified the entryway, or the doorways are not wide enough. They don't have disabled toilets because they're an older pub, that sort of stuff. If you were to go to the Totes, it's awkward. If you were to go to any of the other pubs, the Fox and all that kind of stuff, there's an inherent physical barrier in most of the venues to get into.
yeah.
The newer ones, of course, are better. I mean, if you look for a purpose-built, they're required by law to have accessibility. They need to have a disabled toilet and stuff, and that works fine. But then you've got to find them, and you've got to know where you're going, and it's got to be the right crowd.
Yeah.
That's
Absolutely.
been the barrier for me, is the physical access. And it's equipment.
And unfortunately, that does exist.
Yeah. Everything's underground here. You're in
and let's hope things change for the better.
Slowly.
I'm very mindful of the time,
Yes.
and we want to allow time at the end for any questions that haven't come up through the chat. What I'd like to do is, it was asked of me to identify the 5 most commonly asked questions within the sexual health service. And by far the most commonly asked was around fertility, or is around fertility. Can I be a parent? Can I have a child? And I just wonder if this is an area that we can have a discussion about. Obviously, both Sandra and Catherine have disclosed that they have had children after their injury. So I'd love to hear, I won't ask you, Sandra, because you're eating, but I would love to get your perspective of that. Catherine, can you start the discussion there?
Sure, then just disclose I provided evidence. I've got 2 young boys. I found when I was thinking about having children that there wasn't very much information out there. There have been a few different groups and different people that I've found over the last couple of years that have been really helpful for that. I actually wrote about my experiences because I didn't find anything out there. So I've got a blog that's got a heap of information. I think Sue's going to share the link for that at the end. But yeah, for me, a lot of it was just fun working it out as I went along. I'm from just outside Launceston. It's not a very big hospital, and none of the obstetricians had any experience with spinal cord injuries. So with my first pregnancy, it was sort of, we were quite cautious about it. My obstetrician was worried about whether the baby would grow properly. I have huge babies, that's not a problem. But I ended up with 2 cesareans, not related to my spinal cord injury. My first was posterior, so facing the wrong way, which is a very hard way to have a baby, even if you can feel and push properly. And then my second, I was scheduled for a C-section and went into labour early, and he was in distress, and so we made the decision to have a caesarean anyway, because that was sort of our plan going through anyway. From a fertility point of view, we had no trouble conceiving naturally. I got pregnant straight away with both my kids. So for me, that was the getting pregnant wasn't an issue. The pregnancy itself wasn't an issue. I found that I got quite tired, which I understand women get quite tired when they get pregnant anyway. And I think with my second, I found that by the time I got towards the end of my pregnancy, it was starting to be a little bit difficult on my wrists because of the extra weight I was carrying. But yeah, I mean, I was also looking after a toddler at that point as well.
I was going to say, Catherine, did you get a hand looking after your toddler during that second pregnancy, or did you manage it essentially on your own with your husband?
I'd say more on my own. Our parents are only 10 minutes away either side, mine and my husband Tim's. So they would spend a bit of time with Will, my eldest, through the week, but I do all my self-care myself and everything. So I don't have a support worker or anything. I just have a cleaner who comes in once a week. So not a huge amount of external support on a day-to-day basis, but lots of family and friends that we could call on to help if we need.
Yeah. Awesome.
Did you want me to speak now?
Sandra, now that you've finished having your snack.
Sorry, that was meant to be a crosscut for the baby, but I ended up eating it. That didn't.
Oh,
yeah.
That happens.
So, yeah, I guess I did have trouble getting pregnant, but it was probably more just my age, and I had a history of endometriosis. But the hardest for me was that I got really contradictory advice, I guess, both while still in hospital, even just because we were trying to get pregnant or had already started talking about it. And I've got to say, it was probably one of the first questions I asked once I came out of the ICU and realised that I was paralysed. And they said then no, and then we heard sort of maybe, no. And I guess the main concern was the damage to my sacrum, and that my sacrum's still in about 60 pieces, and that the bones just wouldn't be able to handle the weight, or that there might be such a shift that I'd get even more permanent damage. But in the end, we ended up getting quite a few different opinions from different obstetricians. And I found one who I guess just gave me the answer I wanted to hear. But no, none of them had experience with someone with a spinal injury before, but I just liked this woman's sort of pragmatic approach. And she was like, well, you've already lived through a year of your life thinking you might be able to walk again. And if that did happen as a result of your pregnancy, in your mind, would that be worth it? And I was like, well, absolutely, yes. And so she just said, well, what are you waiting for? She said, from a practical perspective, you know, I might end up having to be in bed if we saw that I wasn't able to support the weight, or my pelvic floor was giving out. And then she said, but, you know, completely able-bodied women end up in bed for, you know, a trimester or two. So I found her just really reassuring that no pregnancy, injury or not, goes exactly as, or not many pregnancies, injury will not go exactly as planned. And I had a planned cesarean. I think it's really interesting that they didn't, so I didn't have any option. I went through a hospital up in Victoria, and as soon as they heard about my injury, they said I had to have a cesarean. So yeah, it's really interesting to see that Catherine, they waited. At the end, I did end up having some contractions and I couldn't feel them. And so I was glad that we booked in that cesarean early. It was about 5 weeks before he was due, because I was worried that I would maybe start having contractions at night and not feel it, and, you know, it might lead to distress with the baby. So yeah, for me, I really liked having a planned cesarean. I had no desire to necessarily go through a natural birth. I wanted a healthy baby. So it all ended up really, really well in the end. And Max arrived and he was, you know, 5 weeks early planned, but he was a good healthy weight, and he's a nice healthy baby now too.
I did find that depending on which medical professional I talked to, I did have a few different people that told me that, yes, I would have to have a cesarean without considering anything. Her obstetrician was really good. She was quite happy for me to take things as it went and see how the labour progressed. Like, we always knew that it was quite a possibility, but I always felt like I had the control to say if I was happy to it was a discussion between her and I. And the same with an epidural. I ended up having one, but she did let me labour for a little while before I did. And they were concerned about dysreflexia, obviously. So once my blood pressure was starting to rise, she and I together decided that, yes, that was something that we needed to do. But I always felt the whole way through that I had, that it was a discussion between her and I, and that we had a choice. My second labour, because I went into labour early, was not my usual medical team, and I had a awful anaesthetist who refused to listen to anything I had to say about dysreflexia, and told me that because I had a fever, I had an infection. And so as a result of that, I was under a general anaesthetic for my second rather than spinal. So that was very frustrating for me, especially because every medical professional up until then had been wanting my opinion on things, because they didn't know anything about anyone with a spinal cord injury having a baby. So they actually kind of took it as an opportunity to learn something with me along the way. And she just barged in there and flat out refused to listen to anything I said. The other thing I was going to say is contractions. For me, I can't feel them per se, but I just feel like I really, really need to go to the toilet. And so when I went into labour with Harry, I did know that they were happening. So I can feel them both with my hand and my stomach. I can feel my stomach contracting. But also I just constantly feel like I need to go to the toilet. So I'm back and forth to the bathroom, and then it kind of clicked in my brain that, yeah, this is like every 4 minutes. This is, and sort of
something beyond, yeah.
I didn't need to be.
Of the males in the panel, is there anyone that has explored fertility options? And
chipping in here. Yeah. Sorry, Sue, did you want to add to that sentence?
no, and just to ask you to share.
Yeah. So yeah, early for me, I had my injury when I was 30, and it probably took me till I was probably 35, 36, or towards the late 30s that we were going to get ready to have another child, because I had a child prior to my injury. So my biggest question straight out was, can I have children? Would I be, could I fertilise,
Yeah.
Be able to do that? And being a C4 quadriplegic, that doesn't ejaculate, I thought, can I do that? Can I be a part of this? So when going through the Melbourne IVF system was really good, and this is people who go too. They were really awesome, supporting me and what we want to do and how we want to do it. And it wasn't a problem for me in the sense of my semen was fine, it all worked, but we probably left our run a bit late. We tried for 6 or 7 years, but it just didn't take, and just because of probably our age, and we were getting towards our 40s, and it wasn't successful. But I'm TAC funded. I was totally supported by TAC, but IVF is very expensive, and they paid for the whole thing, which was fantastic, and took a lot of pressure off the financial side of it. And it was a good experience apart from it didn't work out. We were really well supported.
Yeah.
And just on that, okay.
I guess also for if you meet someone in a wheelchair, for me it was different because I worked as a support worker for a while, been on a rugby team. So I knew that a lot of guys in chairs still could be a dad, but I guess for girls who don't know that, it's a big thing. And just for the guys to know that it would be a possibility and that it's often, just a way of IVF or whatever, that it's still possible. I guess that changes in a relationship as well, because if you go in it thinking, oh, that's not a possibility, and if you really want it, that can hold you back from getting into the relationship, I guess. Whereas if it's out in the open that it is a possibility, that takes a lot of worries away too, I guess.
So do we need to make sure you put that on your eHarmony profile?
Oh no, I wouldn't do that, but more the guys to know that that's not an issue.
Just in bold letters, I like strolls along the beach and am fertile. So
yes, maybe.
Yeah, no, but it's not. But it's something we spoke about. Like the question came up, and I'd never really explored it because I guess I hadn't been in a situation where I'd been with anyone that I wanted to have children with. So it's like, oh, okay. When the question was asked, I'm like, well, I suppose I better explore this. So yeah, went through Monash IVF, and I found that they were helpful with me in the process, and just information gathering really. So for when we do want to have children, like it's not just a shock and it's not being overwhelmed. It's all right. We've got the information. We now know the processes. So yeah, I wouldn't put the processes on eHarmony. Just that might scare some people off. But,
well, I just want to add as well, the whole my part of the IVF was the easiest part. My partner had to go through so much in the sense of all the hormones and everything that she went through, and it was amazing to see that all, but really huge on her behalf what she had to go through and the whole trip, So of course we supported each other right through that, but it was another world I had no idea about with all that fertility stuff, but big journey for me. Very big journey.
Yeah.
And we had a go, going back, I don't know, like 6 years ago now, I guess. I was 44, and it was close to 40-ish. We had 2 rounds, but it didn't take. For me, it was, I guess, been in the chair for quite some time. They actually, when they had to get some semen, they actually had to put me under and take a bit of my nut, so they can extract some.
Not quite syringe.
Well, okay.
So he's exaggerating a bit.
I say I lost my nut over it anyway. But
not a pleasant experience. I think that's as from my side and from Dave's side. I think it is. of course, that you can't go through that without it being emotional. It's a huge emotional roller coaster, especially just being pumped with hormones. I think it's probably one of the really difficult things, and obviously we can't, we won't have children, which I think is huge disappointment, but then we've had to refocus from that.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks so much for sharing, everybody, that the difficult journey of fertility, but I think it's really, it's a worth discussion, as you say, to know that it is a possibility and there are options. Peter, thanks for sharing that TAC helped fund that IVF situation. There are public services available as well, very high or a long wait list, but I think it's one of those areas that's increasing. It's made me also consider that we wanted to just quickly talk on what is funded through the different funding bodies. Now with NDIS, I suppose from a sexual health perspective, we haven't had a lot of experiences of equipment being funded. TAC definitely will fund most equipment that you put in for. And if you get the right justifications through the health professionals, you'll get funded for most things through either work cover or TAC. And we're seeing more and more applications going in from an NDIS perspective. But it's still a work in progress, mainly because people aren't putting in the effort to put in those applications. But I do believe that they will be successful over time, and that will be a much easier process.
Yeah, I'm hearing it's getting recognised a bit more and more as it goes on.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think the difficulty is it's a battle to get a lot of things, and perhaps people are choosing that the sexual health side of things isn't as important as some of the other aspects of leisure, activities of daily living, mobility, things like that. But it will get, I can see it being a much easier process in the future. I wanted to also suggest that part of the questions that are most commonly asked through the Sexual Health Service is about funding. It's also about information, and as Sal said at the beginning, we will be able to send out some links of reliable information. There's a lot of information on the internet, but it's not necessarily reliable. And I reiterate to everyone, if you've got any concerns or questions, speak to health professionals. Obviously, not all of them are as quick to not listen to your requests. Catherine, it's sad to hear that, you know, sometimes when you put forward suggestions, it's not welcomed, but health professionals will be able to navigate some of the information that you might hear and justify whether that's appropriate or not.
I've had lots and lots of people that I've dealt with, and she's been the only person that I've had a really negative experience with. So
yeah.
One out of dozens isn't too bad, I suppose.
Absolutely. And I mean, I suppose given the circumstances, it becomes more of her issue. Obviously, it reflects on you, but I would imagine in most circumstances, health professionals would help navigate some of the misinformation that might be sourced through different services. But anyway, those resources will be sent out to people after the webinar. I'm mindful again of the time. We've got a short amount of time. So I'm just wondering if it's an opportunity now, Naz, to see if there are any questions.
Yeah, there's hopefully there'll be a few that come through. I haven't seen any specific questions come through. I'm just having a quick look now. Just some comments about health professionals, you know, not knowing what they should be knowing. But that's the thing. I think it's really important when you're gaining or searching for information, you know, speak to people in the know. and that's people like Sue and people at AQA Aspire, and also the network, the Spinal Community Injury Network. There's a whole range of people you can speak to and get advice about different things about funding, for example. Something we're talking about funding. TAC, I know they fund pretty much the IVF process and all medications like Viagra or Cialis, and I'm not sure what else there is.
Levitra.
What is that?
There's 3 oral medications, so that if one doesn't work or you have a bad reaction to one, so this is for erectile dysfunction. There's Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra. And it's worth exploring all 3 if you're not getting the adequate results from one or the other.
In saying that, it's pretty dangerous, I've heard, to take a combination. You have
Absolutely.
to take one, only one.
Only one.
It works against your body in a bad way where you can have a stroke or,
Well, I think it's also worth mentioning that any of them can have the side effects of increased blood pressure, and any sexual activity can increase dysreflexic response. So to be mindful of your body and your responses that you're having to either the medication or the activity is paramount, really, because dysreflexia untreated is, as you say, a serious issue.
Mm. Well, I mean, a lot of people actually, it's a serious question, sort of makes sense in their mind. Can I take half of Viagra and half of Cialis? But I think you can actually you can die by taking that combination, I've heard.
Yep.
Just wondering, we've only got a few more minutes. Just tips or a last piece of advice for people? Maybe do we go around soon? Just
yeah, that's a good idea, Naz.
Yeah. I think we've got 3 minutes or 4 minutes.
Okay, so get your advice up and ready.
Okay.
Who'd like to offer their take-home message? I think we should all have something.
Yeah, this is just, if you're going to have children, don't think what you can't do, think what you can do. I'm a quadriplegic father that is very conscious. We've had 20 years old. I brought up my son a lot when he was a kid, and we did so many fun things, and it was an awesome journey. So I don't think you can, because you definitely can. You definitely can. Yeah.
Great advice, Peter.
I'll put some advice in there. I think having a disability when it comes to relationships is don't get caught up in the traditional relationship sense. It's try different things and do what works for you. What works for one person doesn't necessarily mean it's right for you. So experiment and just develop the relationship the way you want to, and not according to social conceived norms.
And I think on top of that as well, like, don't be afraid to experiment and have it go wrong, and talk to each other. Like, if there's something you want to try or what you want to do, just don't bottle it all up and in the end make it a big thing. Just be open to talk about things. And yeah, if something goes wrong, well, at least you tried. So don't be scared to try things that aren't in the normal picture.
Yeah, and I guess the big thing is a lot of the things that we face in our relationships have nothing to do with the spinal cord. They're just regular things that people in regular relationships would have anyway. I think, and that's really important, that we grow through that anyway, and a lot of that has nothing to do with the spinal injury. I guess my other thing is for the single guys out there, because we haven't really spoken too much about it, is like, be creative when you're going out meeting people. Really think outside the box, and be confident. And if you're sort of learning to be confident, fake being confident, and it will come naturally in time as well. And just be yourself. That's probably the biggest thing. Meeting anyone, whether you're looking for a relationship or professionally or whatever, just meeting people. So
I just saw a question come in saying that there's a debate on social media that sex is not a right. and especially not for people with a disability, I guess that means, that question. I guess sex is a human right, actually. We all have a right to have meaningful relationships. And so I guess it's really what everyone's been saying, Dave and Antonio and Alex, Arenchka, is get to know yourself and what you want and then fight for it. And I think it really is a fight a lot of the time. I feel like it's a fight, like Catherine was talking about, just day to day in restaurants and, you know, just, or in a bar when you meet someone new, or making new friends, or at the office, meeting new people. But yeah, if you do stick with it and, you know, go home and have a cry, but then go back out the next day and fight for it again, and really fight for what you want with healthcare professionals, and keep on getting second and third and fourth and fifth opinions, that, yeah, you can get a lot out of life, and it is actually your right to get anything you like out of life.
You're exactly right, Sandra. You're absolutely right. It is a right. And I think the question also was identifying that the controversy is within the NDIS. So until people start putting in their applications, and until people start, you know, requesting this side of support, I think we're still going to get a lot of controversy. So we really do have to be mindful as participants, but also as health professionals, to put these requests forward so that it can be seen and it can be granted that support.
And just on that, so I think it's important to be really clear with what you request as well. Like if you take a lot of the vagueness out of what you request and be direct with what you want, I think it'll take a lot of the grey area out of it. Just be direct and say, this is what I want, this is why I want it.
The NDIS process is very complex, and they do have a language all on their own. So you've got to tick those boxes, and I think until it's all seen as a much more normalised process, it's still going to be difficulty. There's going to be difficulties.
Exactly. It's sex and relationships is a very, very normal part of life. I just think Australia and NDIS are very behind in the way they think. You look at all overseas type of programs, what they've got going, cancer insensitives, funding bodies, they're all way ahead of us. Look overseas, bring that evidence to NDIS, because it's all research, it's all out there. There's lots of it there.
The next question that came through is quite an interesting one, and I don't know if anyone can answer it, but does anybody own or know of the intimate rider, and whether it is useful or not? That's a second question.
I haven't used that brand, but I just had a quick Google when I saw the questions, and we made a home version of that, I'm guessing. And yeah, it's like well, what we made was like a sliding board on some rails on the bed, so I could feel active and not just passive, I guess, in lovemaking. So yeah, I guess we didn't use the brand name, but I think we did the hodgepodge home version.
So the intimate rider's focus is about pelvic thrusting of the person sitting on like a swing type seat. And yes, you're exactly right, Sandra. It creates the participant to be active. So is there anyone on the panel that can speak of?
I've seen one, and I know some people that have got one. I'm pretty sure TAC will fund one. Well,
not without question, they will fund it.
I have seen them. There's a video on YouTube for anyone that wants to see what we're talking about. It's pretty informative, but yeah, I've seen one and know people that have got one and rave about them.
In your closet?
No, I wasn't going to name names, so.
Obviously, people are needing to move on because we have hit our time. I was just going to acknowledge Peter's participation. He's had to leave. Thanks, Peter, for being part of the panel.
Yeah, just want to say as well, I mean, we're talking about going out as well. I mean, a lot of the guys, I know Antonio for a fact, we shared some pickup lines. Antonio's got quite a few if anyone wants to know what they are. And I didn't think they'd work, but they do apparently.
There's proof, Naz. There's proof.
Ah,
So we've got a few people starting to drop out. Did everybody get a chance to offer their tip or trick?
I think Alex.
I just
Alex?
want to say, if you're imaginative, like the thing about that intimate rider, for those that have a sling or a hoist in their house, it can be adapted for that kind of purpose, I guess. If there are ways and means, you just have to be a little bit more imaginative and obviously careful about the strength of your ceiling if you're going to use your hoist or your sling in that respect.
So you reckon out with the chandelier, swinging from the chandelier,
Yeah.
in with swinging from the hoist.
Especially the mobile sling hoist contraption that looks like an engine hoist contraption, and I've seen that being done in certain other places that I've been to that I won't name.
Does anyone else have any tips? I'm just going to reiterate the tip that we've spoken about many times in this session, and that is talk with your partner, plan with your partner, work it out together what's going to work for you from a relationship and from an intimacy perspective.
And also remember that you're also the expert about your own individual situation, regardless of what the doctors tell you or the nurses tell you. Having been on both sides, I work in a hospital myself now, part-time, and I work with people with varying degrees of disability because of their medical condition. And I always ask them to tell me, even though I'm a disability, I ask them to tell me about their individual experience and what is it that they can or cannot do, or what's their doubt or their question. So I would encourage anybody that's listening today to do the same thing. You are the expert about your own body. You tell them what you can or cannot do, and do not let them dictate to you.
Yeah, and just on that as well, I think the important thing, like even within the spinal community, don't compare yourself with other people, even though they have the same injury as you or same level of injury. Your function is your function. So even though we all have very similar injuries, our capabilities are different as well. So as Alex says, become the expert in your function, and that's really important.
yeah.
I liked what Sandra said earlier about working out what works for you and what works for you now post-injury as well.
I think AQA's just, I don't know if there's still people out there listening, but AQA's got like a range of support networks, including like a partners and friends group for people with spinal cord injury. So they can speak to other people about their personal situation and get advice of someone else who's either going through it or has gone through it.
So thank you everybody for your participation today. Thank you to all the attendees who joined us and that are still with us. Thanks to all our panelists. I really appreciate that you've given up your time and also shared some very intimate details of your life with us. It's much appreciated. And I know we've seen a little bit of chat come in too from attendees who are very grateful for the time and the wisdom you've shared.
And so do you want to talk about the resource list as well?
I was just about to mention that, Alex. So Alex has put together a very comprehensive resource list, which some of the other panelists have also added to. So we'll send that out. Anyone who's registered for the webinar, I'll send that out to your email address. And when we post the video, I'm sure we can hang a file off the video link as well so that people will be able to access it. One of the other things I think is worth keeping in mind, I guess it's been said in different ways, but anything you have heard today, check the facts. Check if it's right for you. Don't take it as gospel or truth until you've checked it out with a few people. Sandra had a great story where she got 6 opinions before she was convinced of what course of action to take. So please do talk to other people. Do check your facts. Don't take anything as gospel. All right, I think that's it. Thank you to everybody. I will sort of close the webinar now, or we can, people can stay and chat if people have got time to chat, but we may need to sort of start to drift off. So attendees are starting to drop out now. Panelists, feel free if you want to stay and chat a little bit longer. Otherwise, thank you. We've got a couple of thumbs up for thanks to the panel again from some of the attendees as well. Stay tuned for the video. Stay tuned for our next webinar coming up in a couple of weeks. I think it's working with carers. Please send us an email if you have any questions or any thoughts that came out of today or any topics that you'd like covered in future sessions. Thank you all.
Yeah, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
See you.
Bye.